To come in, and they're going to have a triple truck, a flying drop kick.
The Von Erich family was loved by many wrestling fans around the world for their in-ring abilities and nonverbal communication in the squared circle. But beyond the glitz and glam of their stardom, the Grim Reaper was always knocking on their door. The brothers lived a fast life, but death always found a way to catch up with them, forcing some of them to take their own lives. Bad things happen to good people. The Von Erich family's story starts with their unlucky father, Jack Adkisson, aka Fritz Von Erich, who was always unlucky from an early age. His bad luck began when he wanted to become a football player and tried to break into the Canadian Football League in Edmonton. Unfortunately for him, he did not make the cut, and life had other ideas. He later met Stu Hart, who trained him in professional wrestling and named him Fritz Von Erich. Fritz was a German Nazi persona who would generate heat from the fans, often preying on their patriotism. Starting off, he was paired with his brother, Waldo Von Erich, and together they formed the Evil German Brothers. Although they had a bad public image due to their Nazi gimmicks, it paid them well. As we all know, sometimes bad publicity is good publicity. It was the fame that mattered the most, and they managed to get it. Throughout the 1950s, he had a dynamic career, until his nightmare in 1959. In that dark year, on one snowy day, Jack Adkisson's firstborn son, Jack Jr., was electrocuted and subsequently drowned in Niagara Falls, Canada. At the age of 6, Jack Jr. was declared dead. This was the beginning of countless tragedies in the Von Erich family. The death of Jack Jr. was devastating to Fritz, but it did not stop him from continuing with his career as a professional wrestler and maintaining his weekly travels. The loss of a son may have weakened him emotionally, but physically, he came back more vital than ever before. He would later train his other children to become professional wrestlers, but given Jack always had bad luck staring at him, he lost 5 of his sons while he was still alive. But how did his sons die? Let us begin with the death of David Von Erich.
Barroom brawl, a back alley bash.
David was often regarded as the most technical wrestler in the Von Erich family. According to many, he was destined for major success in pro wrestling. As a matter of fact, David was so good in his trade that in 1984, he was on track to beat Ric Flair, who was then the NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
For his family tonight, not only his career, his own career, but his family. Down goes Flair.
The storyline was already in place. It all started with his brother, Mike Von Erich, winning David a title shot as he survived a 10-minute challenge with the man in the red robe, Ric Flair. Unfortunately, the same year that David was given a title shot was when he died at 25. He did not even get the opportunity to take his shot for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. During an All-Japan Pro Wrestling tour, David was the reigning United National Champion, and he was set to wrestle several times throughout the tour. But things took a drastic turn as he was found dead in his hotel room on February 10, 1984. According to reports, David was positioned as if he was trying to reach for the phone. The cause of his death drew various suggestions from fans and other wrestlers alike. Some people said that David might have died from a substance overdose. Yes, the Von Erich brothers, indeed, were known to abuse substances from time to time, but it was not 100% confirmed that the cause of David's death was substance use. As a matter of fact, there were other reports that suggested that David died from a medical problem. According to those reports, David died of acute enteritis, which resulted in his intestines rupturing. This led to his body being filled with blood, and as a result, David suffered a heart attack. The news of his passing spread like wildfire. David was technically gifted, and his fans adored him for his skills in the ring. His fans were left devastated by his passing. His funeral was attended by more than 4,000 people, and others were calling media houses to confirm if the sad news was true. He was by far the most talented of the Von Erich brothers, but he never got the golden opportunity to win the NWA Heavyweight Championship, as he had always dreamed. For the second time, Fritz Von Erich was going to bury his son. But the tragic story of the Von Erichs did not stop at that, as 3 years later, a dark cloud would befall the family once again.
Mike Von Erich with a headlock on Mike Williams.
Just 3 years after the death of David Von Erich, the hard times of the Von Erich family continued. Mike Von Erich toured Israel in 1985. That year, he suffered a shoulder injury during his tour. The impact of the injury was so severe that he had to undergo surgery on August 22nd. After Mike had undergone the surgery and he was eventually released from the hospital, things started going from bad to worse. Mike developed a fever of up to 107 degrees, leading to him losing weight and looking sickly. It was later determined that the condition was a result of toxic shock syndrome. He had also suffered brain damage at that time. He had limited communication ability and appeared physically frail. His public appearances made both him and his fans very uncomfortable, as he was brought back sooner than he should have been. Despite this, the family tried to carry on as they intended to maintain their brand in the ring. However, as time passed, it became clear that Mike could not compete due to his condition. But this was just the beginning of tough times for Mike Von Erich. At one time, he was arrested following a behind-the-wheel incident. On that day, Mike was driving while intoxicated when he got arrested and charged with drunk driving. The pressure was mounting on Mike as his public image was being tarnished. It was even becoming more challenging for him as he realized that he was not able to compete at the high level he had before. He felt the pressure was becoming too much, and he could not take it anymore. On April 12, 1987, Mike was found overdosed on tranquilizers, and his body was lying in a sleeping bag. This was just a short distance away from his childhood home. Mike Von Erich became the third son of Fritz Von Erich to die. At that time, Fritz was still alive, and he had to bury another son. To give you a short story of what would have happened if Mike had not died. In 1986, WCCW tried to give him a feud of his own. This feud was against Brian Arias. This was because Mike's brother, Kerry Von Erich, had an ankle injury and was out of wrestling at that time. Therefore, Mike and Brian Arias were supposed to battle on May 3, 1987, in a match at Parade of Champions. This meant that Mike was on the way to redeeming himself as a good wrestler and making a greater name for himself. But just like his brother, who died before winning the NWA Heavyweight Championship against Ric Flair, Mike died before getting the opportunity to redeem himself. The question here is, was this family cursed? I will let you answer that. This leads us to the next tragedy, which involves the youngest Von Erich, Chris Von Erich. All that Chris wanted was to be like his father and his older brothers, but his desire to be like his big brothers led to nothing but his downfall. Just by looking at him, Chris had nothing in him that showed the signs of a professional wrestler. As a matter of fact, he lacked everything from the size to the agility, and his strength was nowhere near the minimum requirements of a wrestler. Apart from all this, Chris had asthma. I mean, he lacked everything, but was nature so cruel to him that he had to be the one with asthma? Chris might have been the size of a house cat, but he had the heart of the king of the jungle, a lion. He was wrestling full-time in the early 90s. It was evident that Chris loved wrestling more than any of his brothers. Most of the time, he was fighting alongside Kevin, his brother. This was because not only was he short, but also his abilities were short. As time passed, it became clear as daylight that Chris Von Erich was not just cut out for wrestling. He was a good guy, and his fans loved him for that. But as the saying goes, you can change everything in this world, but you will never change the sun, the moon, and the truth. And the truth was that Chris was not a wrestler. He even broke both arms in a tag team match with Kevin. Chris felt the pressure of failing to compete on the same level as his brothers. Nature was against him by giving him a small body and topping it up with asthma. But even when he tried to stand up against all odds, things never went his way. He reached a point where he could not take it anymore and had to do something about it. It was later revealed that Chris suffered from depression after his brother, Mike Von Erich, died. As a result, he started abusing substances as he was in need to get rid of the pain. Being mentally stressed and physically not cut out for wrestling, he decided that it was time to leave. One day, Fritz and his wife Doris found a note in Chris's room that showed that Chris was about to do something bad to himself. Fritz and Doris sent Kevin to go look for his brother. On September 12, 1991, Kevin found Chris's body outside of the Von Erich family farm. Chris had decided to stop living, and as a result, he held a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. Chris's death was followed by the demise of Kerry Von Erich. Kerry's shortcomings began in April 1986 when he collided with a police cruiser on a motorcycle. This incident ended up injuring his foot so badly that the doctors even suggested that his foot had to be amputated. But luckily for him at that time, the doctors thought otherwise and decided to let him keep his foot, failing to quench his thirst to get back to wrestling.
Surprise! Kerry got up and Lawler was busy parading to the crowd. Kerry got up like nothing happened.
Kerry returned to the ring earlier than expected. On December 25, 1986, he wrestled and ended up re-injuring his foot once again. This time, the doctors were not going to show any mercy to his foot. His foot was amputated following the injury, and his family decided to keep it a secret. He used to put on a prosthetic foot and always kept his boots on. But it was clear to everyone that his walking style had changed because he had developed a limp to his normal walking style. On November 12, 1988, his prosthetic was revealed during a match against Ed Colonel De Beers Wiskowski. This was after De Beers accidentally pulled off Kerry's boot, which exposed his man-made foot to the audience. He quickly jumped out of the ring and stuck his leg under the ring apron. After putting his boot back on, he got back in the ring to resume the match. No videos of the incident ever emerged, as it was all supposed to be kept a secret. Kerry Von Erich used to endure a lot of pain, and he was always on painkillers as he tried to numb his pain. This led to him being addicted to pain relievers. His constant pain did not stop him from living his dream as a professional wrestler. In 1990, Kerry signed up with the World Wrestling Federation, which is currently known as World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, as Erich. Kerry was not just addicted to painkillers. His brother said Kerry wasn't addicted to any one drug, he liked drugs. It wasn't that he liked coke or ice or meth. He just liked that life, parties and drugs. He had become a WWE superstar, but his private life was full of struggles. In 1991, his wife Catherine divorced him and decided to take their 2 daughters with her. His misfortunes continued when he was arrested in September 1992 for prescription forgery. He was later checked into rehab after the arrest and was sentenced to 10 years of probation. As time went on, Kerry kept on insisting that he was leading a sober life. But he was arrested again in January 1993 for possession of coke.
Kerry said that evidently he'd gotten in from the airport and he was like not himself. He was kind of maybe a little drunk and maybe he had a pill they'd combined or whatever, but enough they wanted to search him.
He realized that such an offense would only lead to him serving time in prison. Kerry was not ready for prison at that time. As a result, he decided that it was time to stop living. Kerry Von Erich took his life on February 17, 1993, at the age of 33. After all his brothers and father passed away, Kevin Von Erich remains the only member of the Von Erich family alive today. Kevin might have turned his back on professional wrestling, especially after it took a tragic toll on his family, but that was not the case. As of 2024, Kevin is 66 years old, and he was the subject of the movie The Iron Claw, which was a story of his family and their legacy. Today, Kevin is a public speaker and a proud supporter of his sons, who are pursuing a career in wrestling. Kevin retired as a full-time professional wrestler in 1993 after countless tragedies had befallen his family. Since then, he has only been making guest appearances at shows. According to reports by Dallas Morning News, Kevin and his wife moved to Hawaii in 2006 and raised their children. They have 2 boys, Ross and Marshall, and 2 girls, Kristen and Jillian. He used to spend time in his 7-acre ranch, where he would look after chickens and goats. His son Marshall said that he, his brother, and his father would relocate to Bourne, Texas to set up the new Von Erich headquarters. Kevin's days in the ring are long gone, but he is not afraid of turning up from time to time and unleashing the Iron Claw on special occasions. His sons, Marshall and Ross, debuted for All Elite Wrestling in December 2023.
The agility of Orange Cassidy helps out there. The quickness of putting up the boots on that big splash. He makes the tag. Here it is.
And Marshall Von Erich in. And some big shots from Menard and Parker.
During the weekly AEW episode of Rampage, the 2 brothers competed in a 6-man tag team match as they teamed up with Orange Cassidy. Their opponents had an issue with the outcome of the match. As a result, they decided to attack Cassidy and the 2 brothers after the match.
Wait a minute. No. Kevin Von Erich, the father of Ross and Marshall, Kevin Von Erich.
Kevin Von Erich made his way to the ring and unleashed the iconic Iron Claw on AEW superstar Jake Hager. Kevin and his sons then stood up and raised their arms in celebration.
So great to come to Texas where we do everything hard in Texas. We hit hard, we fight hard, we claw hard. It's a great night.
That's right, baby.
The Von Erich family was legendary during the 20th century, but those who never got the chance to see the brothers might be wondering who they were. Which leads us to the next segment. Who were they? The Von Erich family was an American professional wrestling family. Their story began with their father, Jack Adkisson, who was a professional wrestler from 1953 to 1982. Jack was trained by the legendary Stu Hart while in Edmonton. Stu later named him Fritz Von Erich and teamed him up with Waldo Von Erich. Together, they used to act like brothers, and they were called the Evil German Brothers. Fritz and Waldo portrayed Nazi personas, and they used to generate heat from the fans, especially the patriotic ones. Despite neither of them being German, their gimmicks used to rile up fans. This was a simple move, but it was very effective. In this move, he would grab his opponent's head and squeeze the head so tightly, leaving them gasping for air and suffering in pain. Fritz Von Erich helped pave the way for his sons, who later grew up to be like their father. The Von Erich brothers all grew up watching their father wrestle in the ring. All that the boys wanted was to be like their father. From an early age, their father trained the Von Erich brothers in the sport. 3 of them, Kevin, Kerry, and David, were all born a year after the other. This allowed them to form a unique bond among themselves. Occasionally, they would train together. When they were not training, they would be busy hunting with their father. The brothers showed great potential under the tutelage of Fritz.
It will be David and Kevin both who come in, and they're going to have a triple truck, a flying drop kick.
When the time was right, the Von Erich brothers were unleashed on the pro wrestling world, and they were now ready to make a name for themselves. It was easy for the brothers to join pro wrestling, as their father, Fritz Von Erich, had taken charge of world-class championship wrestling, which was famously known as WCCW. The siblings had a very strong bond that made them communicate non-verbally in the ring. In no time, the brothers were rocketing towards success in world-class championship wrestling. During the 70s and 80s, Kevin, David, and Kerry saw great success in pro wrestling. At that time, the brothers were very popular public figures, not just because their father helped them to shine, but also because of other factors. During those days, wrestling was booming on television, and it helped them gain popularity faster and reach a wider mainstream audience. Each of them got the golden opportunity to stand out. They all brought something different to the table, as they were gifted differently. Kerry was the physical one, and he was very charismatic. On the other hand, David was a technical wrestler, and his skills were top-notch. Kevin brought his speed and agility to the team. These different abilities created a dynamic trio of the Von Erich brothers. They soon became household names, gracing television screens and pages of comic books. Apart from being professional wrestlers, the Von Erich brothers also appeared in television commercials. They used to advertise the Pizza Inn restaurant chain.
My brothers taught me about wrestling, but I taught them about eating. So he brought us to Pizza Inn's all-you-can-eat buffet.
According to their surviving sibling, Kevin Von Erich, their increased exposure to the spotlight made them quite popular with the ladies. Whenever they entered the ring, it was difficult for them as everyone in the crowd wanted to touch at least one of the Von Erich brothers. Their wrestling careers were classical and legendary at the same time. Fritz Von Erich and his sons left behind a massive following. Their legacy was undeniably impressive. The Von Erich legacy. Although most of them died in a terrible way, their legacy is something to die for. The World Wrestling Entertainment, aka WWE, honored the Von Erichs as accomplished superstars, starting with the patriarch, Fritz Von Erich, all the way to 5 of his 6 sons who became professional wrestlers. The WWE decided to give the name Von Erich the flowers it deserves. The company acknowledged how Fritz quickly rose to become a top performer in the wrestling industry, especially in the 1960s and 1970s. According to WWE, Fritz had an imposing presence in the ring, and his finishing maneuver, the Iron Claw, was very powerful and convincing. Fritz was not just a pro wrestler in the US, but he was also acknowledged as a pro wrestler in Japan. After retiring as a professional wrestler in the ring, he went on to be involved in a promotional capacity in 1982. At that time, he took over the Dallas-based Big Time Wrestling and changed its name to World Class Championship Wrestling, aka WCCW. What happened after that is a story that many fell in love with. From his WCCW, he brought up big names in the wrestling industry, such as Jake the Snake Roberts, Fabulous Freebirds, Paul Bearer, who was once the manager of The Undertaker, and the most beloved Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. His sons Kevin, David, and Kerry stood out in the WCCW. Although all of them were pretty good in their craft, Kerry Von Erich stood tall among them all. This was because he was the one who managed to win the then prestigious NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The success of Kerry Von Erich continued early in the 1990s when he joined the WWE as Texas Tornado and won the Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam. David, Mike, Chris, and Kerry Von Erich, together with their father, Fritz Von Erich, were posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in the class of 2009.
I can remember starting off wrestling, even here in Houston, $35 is what I made for wrestling a night. I can remember that.
Kevin was the only one alive to experience this prestigious moment. Despite their death and Kevin Von Erich's retirement, the Von Erich name lives on. Kevin's sons, Marshall and Ross Von Erich, have taken up the name the Von Erichs in their professional wrestling careers. The two make appearances in All Elite Wrestling, aka AEW, and Ring of Honor, aka ROH. Currently, they are the World Six-Man Tag Team Champions together with Dustin Rhodes. They are also known for appearing in the World League Wrestling. The duo made their debut on April 20th, 2012 after being trained by their father, just like their father was trained by their grandfather. On June 15th, 2014, during the Slammiversary the Warteen of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, TNA, the brothers made their national television debut. These are just examples of the many times that Ross and Marshall Von Erich have managed to keep the name Von Erich on a high profile. As kids, they grew up watching their father wrestle and hearing stories about their uncles and grandfather. They also heard about the curse that surrounds their their family and the Von Erich name. The two brothers always reflect on how unfortunate their uncles were, but they are determined to break the curse that surrounds the family. Marshall once said that they both feel like they are on a mission to finish what their uncles started. To them, wrestling is more than just a sport they love, it is a duty. During an interview with Misa, Ross said, "I just knew in the back of my mind that one day, my brother and I were going to have to finish the family story. We'll go off into the sunset and hopefully it'll be a beautiful ending." The Von Erich family was one of the most elite families in the history of professional wrestling. The fans loved them from when they went pro and supported them until the end. But there will always be questions about what would have happened if the Von Erich brothers had lived to complete what they started. Is it true that David's death was because of substance use, or was it a medical condition? But most importantly, what if their father managed to get into the Canadian Football League and go pro in football instead of wrestling? Sometimes we have our dreams and desires, but when fate comes calling and the Grim Reaper keeps knocking on the family door, there is no escaping. If you enjoyed watching this video and would love to explore more exciting videos like it, click on any of the cards on your screen.